Sorry for the delay. Our participants, who are two of whom are in Israel, Palestine, had a siren go off because of retaliation by the Houthis. So they were having to run for their shelters temporarily, but luckily it passed and they're able to hop back on. But that's the reason for the delay. Yet another reminder of the stakes of this moment and what it's really like to be on the ground doing this work. So let's give it just another minute as people are being admitted. All right, let's get started. So hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Zak Witus. I'm the Young Leadership and Education Manager here at the New Israel Fund. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm so glad that you're here with us today for this conversation with three young American Jews who just finished an intense year of learning and activism on the ground in Israel, Palestine, in the context of NIF's Social Justice Fellowship. At a time when so many young people in our community are withdrawing from the conversation about Israel or thinking about decoupling themselves from the country in general, out of grief, anger, or disillusionment, these three fellows chose a different path. They chose to lean in, to learn, and to take action on the ground, grounded in solidarity. And they really represent what we believe to be a new kind of connection to Israel-Palestine, one that's rooted in progressive values and rooted in relationships with the Israelis and Palestinians who are fighting day in, day out to make the country a better place for everybody, safer, more equal for all people who call the land their home. For nearly 3 decades, NIF has sent social justice fellows to work at our grantee and partner organizations in the context of the Social Justice Fellowship. This project adds crucial capacity to our Israeli and Palestinian civil society organizations while helping a rising generation of American leaders deepen their understanding of the issues, develop their skills, and really develop further relationships with those folks who have the most at stake on the ground. We will have time at the end for Q&A. Please DM me your questions directly and I'll collect them. And we'll save time at the end for those questions. And without further ado, I want to bring in our social justice fellows to the conversation. I want to start by hearing from each of them directly. So Nona, Dikla, and Elisheva, I want to ask you each to briefly introduce yourself, tell us about where you're from, where you went to school, and what organization you worked at this past year. We'll do just a quick go around before delving deeper into each of your stories. So Nona, how about we begin with you?
Okay, hi everyone in all of our respective corners, wherever we are and what time zones. Thank you guys for joining us. It's good to see you all. I'm Nona. I was a fellow at a research center for social welfare and economic policy in Tel Aviv. I studied at UC Santa Cruz.
Yeah, and that was at the Adva Center, a great NIF grantee. Dikla, pass it to you.
Hi, hi everyone. It's good to be here with you all. I'm Dikla. I went to school at the University of Chicago, and I worked at Plus 972 magazine for the past year.
Thank you. And Dikla, you're calling in from Beit Jala in the West Bank, is that right?
I am calling in from Beit Jala, hence the sign. I'm at the Combatants for Peace office. And I apologize if there's any noise. We are just wrapping up our yearly strategy retreat, so people are exiting now.
Yeah, quite all right. And Nona, you're in San Diego. Elisheva.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see all of you. I'm calling in from Jerusalem. This past year on the NIF Social Justice Fellowship, I worked at Bimkom Planning and Human Rights, as well as Rabbis for Human Rights. I split my time at both of these organizations, and I graduated from Columbia and JTS with a degree in archaeology and Jewish texts.
Beautiful. Well, welcome again to you all, and thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, so let's dig a little bit deeper. As I said, this was a really intense year to be in Israel. I mean, it's always an intense time for American Jews to go over there, but especially now with Netanyahu's war of annihilation continuing in Gaza, ethnic cleansing by settlers in the army intensifying the West Bank, continued rocket fire from Hezbollah at the beginning of your fellowship last fall. There was some delay because of threats of Hezbollah rocket fire. Just today, you had to go to the shelters just now because of what's been happening with the Houthis. And you all have continued to do the work throughout. And I want to ask each of you to share one story or one moment from the year that made a big impact on you. I know that there were many moments and there's many stories, but wanted to ask for each of you to share just one that felt especially resonant. No, let's go in that same order and begin with you.
Yeah, there is a lot going on, I do agree. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable to discuss it because you just want to experience it and for it to pass and continue with your daily life. But it is really good to discuss. Um, I guess an important story. I'm actually not entirely sure which one to choose of the many. I'm not sure if Dikla or Elisheva have a specific one.
Yeah, I can actually jump in. There was something that just struck me about Zak's question that I wanted to tell all of you about when I was working at Bimkom. I had the opportunity. Bimkom is an organization that does urban planning, and human rights. A lot of the people that work at this organization have been working there for over 25 years. They are master urban planners and architects. And I was working in the West Bank department, which meant that I got to work hand in hand and in partnership with a lot of our Palestinian colleagues, because most of the work that we do in the West Bank department is go to the West Bank and talk to villagers and villages that are facing expulsion, whether that be via settler violence or also incongruent with army presence. And so I want to tell you all about the time that I went with Bimkom to visit the village of Zenuta. When we went to visit the village of Zenuta, they had already been expelled. So we actually visited them in the place that they had been seeking refuge in Area B. And that, first of all, just the experience of driving from Jerusalem into the West Bank with my Palestinian colleagues as we review the maps and the kind of discussion that we're going to be having with the villagers, talking through how we're going to bring up these harder topics of the fact that they're actively dealing with expulsion, and how the way that we can utilize planning and references to registered private land and all of these different nuances about the planning structures in Israel-Palestine that I got to become really well versed in this past year. And then we actually just sat down. Once we got there, we arrived to the West Bank, to Area B, where we sat down with this community that we're partnering with to help them return back to Zenuta. And we got to hear from each of them how they experienced expulsion. And we were sitting at a specific outlook where we could look at the village, and we had an opportunity to speak to one of the elders of the community and have him kind of show me where the village was from this outlook that we were looking at. And it was deeply emotional and painful to be with this expelled community that we are trying to help through the methods of planning return back to their homes that they had lived in for generations. This man who I was speaking with, he was a grandfather. He was telling me that he was born in Zenuta, and his family, his father and his father's father had been born in Zenuta, and all he wanted to do was just return to his land. And I think it made a huge impact on me understanding, having the personal relationships with him and with the larger community and with my Palestinian colleagues on the ground there to get a larger sense of what's going on and how much it's, like, for lack of a better phrase, hitting us in the face. This is something that needs to end right now. And it just like helped me to maintain my resilience all year after that, to like understand the tangibility of the struggle.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Elisheva. Yeah, I wanted to pose the same question to Dikla and Nona if one of you want to pop in. I know that Dikla is dealing with some Wi-Fi connectivity issues, but I think we've got her back now.
I think I'm back. I don't see you all, but I hope that you can see me. Is the sound
Yes,
okay?
we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Elisheva, for sharing that. I actually think, one of the moments that sticks out to me from the fellowship year is similar. It also relates to the displacement of Palestinian communities in the West Bank, which is something that I was, exposed to through the news. I was very much aware that there was like a surge in state-backed settler violence. It's not a new phenomenon, but that there was a surge,
Looks like we just lost Dikla. Connor, if she hops back on, you could please spotlight her again. But let me turn to the next question that I have here. You guys have lots of experience in movements in the United States, and also actually each of you had spent considerable amount of time on the ground in the land, in educational contexts and in other activist contexts. But wondering if there's anything that surprised you about the experience of working at your host organization at the Adva Center and at Rabbis for Human Rights, or was there anything that you found challenging or changed the way that you think about Israel-Palestine, about activism?
maybe I will try this without getting kicked out again. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Dikla, and then we'll go back to the question I just posed, please.
I'm sorry about that. No, I can try and answer this question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we want to. So I was a longtime fan of magazine, which is where I worked. But I think that it did surprise me how few Israelis were actually familiar with the organization. I knew it was like a small independent media outlet. Of course, it's in English. But it was still very surprising to me kind of how few Hebrew-speaking readers like in Israel, Palestine, we actually had. And for context, 972 magazine has like a sort of sister website called Zicha Mekomit, which means local call. That's all in Hebrew. And I think that I just like expected that people here would be like a little bit more tapped into English media than is actually the case. And again, it's sort of anecdotal experience, but we do also know that the majority of the readers are in North America and in Europe. And I think one of the kind of like silver linings of the work actually in one respect, like this was something that I was a little bit disappointed by, because of course the whole idea is to be sort of making change on the ground. But one of the things that I didn't realize was the extent to which some of the reporting that 972 was doing on Gaza, we have 3 or 4 reporters who have been writing for about 2 years now, basically documenting this war of annihilation that they're experiencing. They can't like separate their own personal experience from what they're reporting on, which is also a very kind of powerful thing. One of the things that ends up happening at the organization is that the articles, which are originally written in Arabic by reporters in Gaza, are translated into English, published on 972, and then local call, Zicha Mekomit, will take that and translate it into Arabic, or sorry, into Hebrew. And I really think that this is like one of the only ways that Israelis are being exposed to
We lost Dikla again, but I think what she was going to say was that this is one of the only ways in which Israelis are being exposed to the narratives and the reporting of Palestinians in Gaza. And it really just goes to show like what a crucial outlet 972 magazine is, along with its sister organization, Local Call, where we've placed social justice fellows for years now. And whether it's providing that reporting for an Israeli audience or for audiences around the world, I think we at NIF really believe in being a bridge building organization, and I really see my role leading young leadership development and building community in the United States as one that's about trying to sync up the progressive movements on the ground with progressive movements stateside, and 972 as an outlet that's sharing reporting and opinions of Palestinian and Israeli activists and journalists and just regular people. It's such a crucial part of that bridge building work. Yeah, so I wanted to turn that question also to Nona and Elisheva.
It is difficult in terms of having conversations, Local Call being translated from the English and not the Arabic, and you think of how many iterations of translation, hopefully you have all the information and the nuance remaining. Being able to talk with people around us, even in the most liberal spaces, there were pockets that we got to know of people that were organizing in ways that I'm seeing is happening in the US in some ways now, to meet what's happening with ICE, where there's kind of a parallel between what's happening with people being abducted. There's something familiar about it, like when we were in the West Bank doing protective presence, and you feel like your rights are compromised, or you might not have rights because you are an immigrant, because you are in an occupied military zone that was reported to be a military zone only recently. Your rights become blurry. So it's difficult sometimes to be in a headspace, to have conversations about it and to be playful with it and curious and inquisitive, especially when you're afraid that people might have a different, might be receiving very different information. So that was something that we experienced within the state there, and of course online, even though it seems everything is accessible.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a powerful parallel that you're drawing between rising authoritarianism in the United States, the sort of tip of the spear of which is the attacks on these immigrant communities across the country, but including in California where you are now, and the ways in which the Netanyahu government and really successive Israeli governments have gone after some of the most vulnerable people without a state to protect them, Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And we're seeing really starkly in the United States now about how far unchecked executive authority can go. And it reminds me of the work that we do to try to resist the judicial coup in Israel, to try to impose some of the accountability for the Netanyahu government. The Supreme Court in Israel it's an imperfect body, right? But it's been one of the few checks on the settler movement and on de facto annexation in the West Bank. So that feels like a really powerful comparison to keep in mind.
In terms of things that were surprising, if I can jump in, also, I think I have two areas that I'm interested to share with you all. One is thing that maybe surprised me, maybe it's obvious to others, but I think when working on the ground, it's easy to understand. The tools are like direct action. And in many of the organizations I work in both in the organizations I worked in Bimkom and at Rabbis for Human Rights, recognizing the role that these organizations had, they recognize themselves, how they can operate on the ground and also utilize the other tools in their pocket, which is exposing international people to what's going on here and helping to develop a shared language for international pressure on Israel to fulfill its legal responsibility to protect the occupied population in Palestine, or to create conditions that will enable the safe return of communities, like I spoke about with Zanuta before. Just like the real role of international pressure that I understood as an activist on the ground in America, and meeting its role with the organizations I worked with on the ground was, in a way, was a new experience for me. And then I'll also say, just in terms of working with Rabbis for Human Rights, it was really powerful in a perhaps surprising way, like to recognize the real way that religion and activism can be meshed together, especially in this land. And I felt that the work that Rabbis for Human Rights does, which is vast, I think that was what was so surprising. They both, like, I had the opportunity to work with creating a public platform for a lot of the Divrei Torah that the over 160 rabbi members of the organization have written over the past few years, both in English and in Hebrew, as well as like going out into the field with our rabbis and our partners and helping to accompany shepherds as they wish to move their flock and herd their sheep. So just like holding all of that together and recognizing like also how to place and where to place my Judaism, because I am like a person who's connected to that religious identity, has been surprising and really helpful frameworks that I've been able to build in this activist setting.
Yeah, that's such a powerful aspect of Rabbis for Human Rights work, that they have the outreach to 160 rabbis around the world. They're doing speaking tours in the United States, going in congregations, and then they're so rooted in the grassroots, and they're active in the field, and to be able to like be operating in these different fora at once, and have it all be interconnected is incredibly strategic. Yeah, and the role of religion, in the United States, I know that young people have been really inspired by Small Amuni, the faithful left in Israel, and there's a Small Amuni USA that's grown up in the last year or so, and there's the Halak left, which is kind of a younger cohort. And that angle of saying that religious Judaism isn't tied up in right-wing nationalism, that the right wing doesn't have doesn't get to speak for all religious Jews, that there's a religious voice on the left that believes in progressive values, that believes in shared society. It is such, I think, a welcome development. And to my mind, in Israel as well as the United States, is really on the cutting edge of the movement building work. So I want to turn to my next question, which is, again, the fellowship took place during an incredibly painful and turbulent period. And I want to know how you all navigated the tension between despair and hope, because I know that there were moments of both. And when the political climate felt bleak, when when reality felt bleak, what kept you guys going? What sustained you?
Of course, we had built some sort of a support network, which is really important, and had already been grounded there for a while and had one another. And when you're going through something that you need to be very present for, just there's not really any questioning of if to despair or not to despair. I think there's kind of the option to despair, I believe, is something that happens more intensely when you're far away, and you can tune in and tune out, but um there's more of an accessibility if you want to. Actually, regardless, I think that grieving was a really important thing, and talking about it, which we said was kind of difficult because you just want the experience to be passing, but talking about it is really important with people around us, and to have community that we can talk to about it, or else it rattles around inside of you and comes out in unexpected ways. So it was good to have those kinds of conversations with one another and with people in our lives.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that really, warmed my heart this year was seeing the three of you come together as a cohort and really show up for each other. I found it really sweet, and I think the folks on staff also really, were really inspired by the ways you guys really came together to support one another.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's hard to know, like, it's hard to be able to point to something and say, this is what sustained me. This tension between despair and hope is very real. And I think Zak, yeah, basically, we all lived in separate cities. I was in Haifa, Elisheva was in Jerusalem, Nona was in Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan. And once a month or so, we'd have these meetings where we would either visit each other's workplaces or visit some other kind of New Israel Fund grantees. And I think it wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but it would always just so happen that after these things ended, we just spent the next like 8 hours together, which I think was this kind of like unspoken collective recognition that we needed each other to be able to make sure we weren't crazy in a way. It was very, very validating to be able to speak like freely, and even though I felt that at work for sure that, like my colleagues are committed to a similar kind of principles sometimes in the general environment, and even with family. I have a lot of family here that doesn't see eye to eye with me, that kind of these opportunities to congregate with Elisheva and Nona was like a respite. So it was something that sustained me, at least, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, I feel so blessed, so grateful to have had a cohort this special, this like connected, and I'll add to it also that like at my workplace, I think that there was also a real ability to share in that despair and hope. Everybody came to work every day, and everybody also read the news every day. So we would sit in our office together, maybe reading Dikla's articles or one of her colleagues or something from Haaretz, and recognizing the real terrifying, horrifying, scary nature of the world we're living in. And also closing our news tab and continuing to work on the work that we were working on. And that, like watching my colleagues who have 20 plus years of experience in this field continuing to do that, I was like, okay, yeah, okay, I can do it too. Like there's a path here, and I have also my co-fellows to lean on and my communities here. But like the people who are doing this work, have also found a way to maintain resilience through it all, and I can utilize that as well.
Yeah. I'm really, I'm personally resonating with everything you guys are saying. I'm based in Brooklyn now, but my formative experiences on Israel-Palestine activism were all happened in the land. And seeing how I first went only in 2018 and did a program called Adva, which is a partner NIFs that we work with on young leadership development work. And seeing the community of activists, for me, it was based in Jerusalem, and these people who are so dedicated and are doing such amazing work. It really shows the way that you can engage in this like ongoing struggle in which there is a lot of adversity, a lot of defeat, a lot of reason to feel despair, but because you're doing it in coordination with other people, and that community can sustain you through coffee and dinner and Shabbat and these like little things. It really showed me that the only way to stay in this struggle, to end the occupation, to get safety and equality and freedom for all people in the land, is to do it in concert with other people. I've never known another way to do it effectively, or to do it in a way that didn't didn't make me just want to give up. So I really resonate with that. I wanted to ask now if to hear a bit more about the kinds of work and the projects that each of you were engaging in. I know you all did so much, but were there any other highlights, any other projects, gatherings, articles, reports that you all worked on that you could share with us?
Definitely. I can speak to things I worked on, but I also feel
Go
sorry. Okay, I can keep going. I can speak to things that I worked on at Bimkom and at Rabbis for Human Rights, but I also feel that this is a really good opportunity, Zach, to talk about one of the times that we got to go on a trip with through the New Israel Fund to the Au Pair prison, where we had this really intense experience to witness the imprisonment of Palestinians and also look at the criminal justice system that they are tried in. And I think this was something that helped inform my larger experience and the projects I worked on at both of these places, and that's why I wanted to bring it up now. Through being on the fellowship, like Dikla mentioned, we had these once-a-month meetups. And so one of the times we met up, we did a tour of the Au Pair prison, where a lot of Palestinians, it's a military prison in the West Bank, where Palestinians are held for multitudes of different reasons, some that had effect on me to teach me like what are the real holes in the criminal justice system, especially here in Israel, because what is breaking a law for an Israeli citizen versus what is breaking a military law for a Palestinian is completely different. There is a real system of a difference of rights and equality. I would call it an apartheid system, especially in Jerusalem. And so looking at it from this lens really up close in the prison, going to meet with different families that were waiting to see their family members who had been in prison for months upon years sometimes, and then going into the different essentially caravans of courtrooms that are these outdoor settings where each person is tried in a military court and they're not actively present. Since COVID, Palestinian prisoners are not brought into the courtroom. They're just shown on a Zoom, like a secured Zoom camera. And so it essentially felt like we were just flipping through different Zoom conversations, watching the court where there was very, very troubling, I would say, like Arabic translation was I'm looking for the right word here, less than good.
Yeah.
And just like watching a real lack of real justice happening in this space that is supposed to be upholding pillars of justice, presumably, and really just negating all of that. And that's kind of how it felt it informed the rest of my experience, like working with planning rights and recognizing how planning is not something that is equally distributed for all people, Jewish and Palestinian, in Jerusalem, the West Bank, or like the way that we access the prison even versus the way that Palestinians access the prison and also access the civil administration hearings for planning in the West Bank, how we enter in through different security systems, and really engaging with the violent bureaucracy that is alive in Israel-Palestine. And I had the opportunity to write about this also through another partnership that I was that I got to participate in through my fellowship, which was through This Is Not an Ulpan. Because when we were on the Social Justice Fellowship, it was really important for the New Israel Fund to allow us to give us opportunity to learn and immerse in Arabic and Hebrew. And so I ended up taking an Arabic class through This Is Not an Ulpan, and then also writing an article through them with them about Arabic and the bureaucracy of violence, the violent bureaucracy that I was witnessing through my work at Bimkom. And that's kind of a project I got to work on throughout the year that was a helpful way of also processing what I had seen and what I was witnessing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Elisheva. Yeah, so just to take a step back, the fellowship, as has been discussed, the main part of it are these internships at NIF grantee and partner organizations. Then we have these learning days, and yeah, having been to Ofer myself, it is startling, right? Like, this is a military prison where Palestinians from the West Bank are tried, and they sit in front of, as you described, Elisheva, a panel of military judges, not civilian judges, military judges. And Israeli settlers who also live in the West Bank do not appear at this court. They're not seen in this setting. And so when you describe in terms of apartheid, I mean, what is apartheid? But two different legal systems for two different people. I mean, it's a crucial element. And our grantee organization, Human Rights Defenders Fund, who led your tour, they've been trying cases here and trying the best they can to eke out some bit of justice for our Palestinian human rights defender partners in the West Bank. But so long as there's this two-tiered system, one set of laws for settlers, one set of laws for Palestinians, the capacity for delivering justice is very small, and it's definitely very harrowing to witness firsthand. So thank you for sharing that.
One detail I think from that visit that I would add that was really striking, we were able to sit in on about, I want to say it was 4 cases. Each of them last no more than 5 minutes. And it's this very disorienting thing. There's people screaming at each other from across the room in different languages. There's someone on a screen on the side here. There's a judge here. There's lawyers talking on the phone here. It's very, very hard to follow what's going on. But at the end, when we asked Michal, I think, the lawyer that we were with from Human Rights Defenders, what are they being tried for? 3 of the 4 cases were TikTok posts. And again, I couldn't catch what exactly the content of such TikTok posts were, but I think it was revealing of like also the kinds of things that Israel is trying to detain people over in the past 2 years, and what this kind of way in which they interpret incitement, which is just indiscriminate, almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dikla, you've done other reporting from the West Bank during your time at 972. Or you want to share about some of the other pieces that you've written?
Sure. I mean, and I started speaking about this before I got cut off, and sorry about that. One of the first reporting assignments that I ever did was in the northern Jordan Valley, um, in an area that Israel declared a firing zone in the 1980s. Basically, the day before I decided to go out there and report, I had gotten word that there was an entire Palestinian shepherding community packing up their belongings and leaving for good. It's called, they were one of the few last remaining communities in Khirbet Samra, which is actually no longer exists. The last family left a few months ago. And so I went out there and I was essentially spent the day with them as they were packing up, loading all of their sheep onto trucks, dismantling solar panels. It was extremely hot. It was the first day of Ramadan. Everybody was fasting. No one was drinking water. No one was eating. The settler youth who had erected an outpost, a pastoral outpost directly above them had this sign that said Shabab Samra in this kind of taunting way. They would come in, do these provocative walks in the village with dogs, would scare the children. This was the kind of stuff that I learned upon speaking with, his name is Yasser Abu Ayram, and he was kind of, I guess you could say, sort of the unofficial leader of this community. He had sort of made the ultimate decision that they needed to leave because the settler terror had become incessant. They were very, very worried for their young children who could no longer make it to school without being harassed, who were afraid to leave their tents. But I basically spent the day with them as they were packing up, and I learned that this would be the third time that this community was displaced since 1948. In 1948, they were displaced from the Naqab, or the Negev, to the South Hebron Hills, where they were then displaced again in the 1990s as Israel declared a lot of that area state land. Then they found their way to the northern Jordan Valley, and here they were packing up again, moving out of Area C into Area B, into an area called Tubas, on the other side of a checkpoint, where, I mean, I'm still in contact with him, and we talk about the prospect of me coming back to visit, but in reality, it's just very hard because they're on the other side of a checkpoint, which they were not before. And I think that it stayed with me for many reasons. Both that, like, watching this, I mean, it's just made very palpable kind of like the surge in state-backed settler violence and the consequences of that. And I was literally watching annexation happen in real time. I think in that, context, it's very easy to see because we're talking about something called the Alon Road, which bisects the West Bank, and there are very, very few Palestinian communities that are on the eastern side of the Alon Road. And Yasser's community being one of the last one, them leaving is significant because that entire swath of land, right from the Jordan River to the Alon Road, is something that Israel has been, has envisioned annexing. Netanyahu quite literally proposed a map in 2019 that outlined this area exactly.
Well, and actually, it goes back to the Alon plan, right?
Exactly.
The member of Knesset and member of the government, if I'm not mistaken, Yigal Alon, who proposed Israel holding on to the Jordan Valley in perpetuity decades and decades ago. So what you're seeing, what you're describing now, and I think the point you're making is like that. Yeah, they're pushing out these villages today, and we've seen almost 50 Palestinian villages in the West Bank forcibly displaced just since October 7th. But in many ways, the blueprints for these operations go back way before Netanyahu. And that is something that we have to reckon with as we try to chart a different path forward, one that resists annexation, and not only that, but that supports self-determination for all people like Yasser and others. As Dikla, as I'm hearing you do your Arabic pronunciations, there was a question in the chat about language abilities, which we think is really important for this fellowship. So I wanted to ask all of you, well, what languages do you speak? And how did you feel that it impacted your ability to do the work of the fellowship, and more broadly, how it changed your experience being in Israel this past year, maybe in comparison to other activists who might come to Israel Palestine, but who aren't equipped in the same way as you all were with these language abilities.
Okay, so we did some classes at a place called This Is Not an Opan, which is the classic Hebrew learning facility for new immigrants into the state. And I'd like to reimagine that as anyone who immigrates into a new country, into a new community, you need a lot of support in doing that. And language is a really big part of that. You know, the history of Hebrew itself, of course, has changed a lot. So, and we all have learned Hebrew over the years with support of our communities and families in these classes as well. But learning Arabic was perhaps one of the most important things to do lately if you're ever considering immigrating anywhere. You'll know that you'll need to know language of the land, and there's just like in San Diego, I need to learn Spanish, and people do learn Spanish here as we are so close to the border. Anyone who's living in the state of Israel and Palestine need to know both languages. It is a necessity of life if you are Palestinian in Israel. If you want to, necessity of life, no, that's not true, but to work, let's say, in job opportunities a lot, and although they are limited in opportunities for different career choices, you'll have to have Hebrew for school if you want to take tests for getting into university in Israel. Of course, there are universities in the West Bank as well. This was something that also came up in Ofer prison, where the lawyers who were from the West Bank had to enter a court that was spoken only in Hebrew, except, you know, the rough translations of a soldier that was in the position at the time. So I'm sorry if this answer is all over the place, but I'm also recounting a story when we were planting trees in the West Bank for with Rabbis for Human Rights. There were a lot of people that looked very similar to everyone who's on the Zoom call. I think that we had showed up to plant a bunch of trees that were recently ripped out by a group of settlers in the West Bank as part of a wave of the planting season, a kind of wave of violence that was against that. When Dikla was speaking, not to call you out, Dikla, but when you were speaking with the farmers, then and because I think you could speak in Arabic to one another, there was a conversation that could be had that led to an invitation to come back to sit with each other and have a meal and to walk around and get to know a place more, and in a way kind of feel familiar, truly, not just to show up and do work quickly before you'll get soldiers that come in and say that you're not allowed to be here for whatever reason. That invitation back, that ability to actually create a connection and to feel familiarity and to be in community, and then understand also all the things that are possible to do once you are familiar with one another and a place and what's happening, and the things that you can offer someone who's coming from somewhere else, or the things that can be offered and can be learned also. This is all just starting just because we could converse a bit in Arabic and in Hebrew and yeah.
Just to put a emphasis on this is not an ulpan, I want to also just explain Ulpan, as Nona said, is like what all of the new immigrants are offered the opportunity to learn Hebrew, but this is not an Ulpan, is an alternative space where they teach Hebrew and Arabic, and they don't hide the tough realities of Israel-Palestine.
It looks like Elisheva froze there, but I think what she was
Hebrew?
saying. Oh, yeah. Are you back, Elisheva? We lost you for a
Yes.
second. Please
Oh, I'm
continue.
sorry. While learning Arabic and Hebrew, you're also learning about the realities of this place, and you're also learning like the words to express that reality.
Yeah. Well, so we have just a few minutes left, and as I move us towards concluding, I want to ask each of you. Well, I'll ask two questions, and you can sort of take your take your pick. But I'm curious how you're bringing hope to, or rather, how you hope to bring this experience of the past year on the Social Justice Fellowship into your careers, into your activism, and into your Jewish life going forward. And the second question is, what would you say to your peers, our peers, who are American Jews who feel maybe either overwhelmed by what's going on, and so they're kind of pulling back because it seems too difficult and too chaotic, or those people who are saying that they want to just cut ties with Israel out of anger, out of rage. You all have chosen. I know that you all feel those feelings as well, and have similar thoughts, but you've chosen to pursue your Israel-Palestine politics in a different way through connection and a kind of, it seems to me, a renegotiation of what that connection to the place means. Um, uh, yeah, so what would you say to your peers who are in that place?
Um, I would say a lot. Um, there's a really important part for anger, an important role for anger to play. I think that it's something that can be really motivating or mobilizing, if you can use it in the right place in the right time for the right reasons with the right people. It's definitely better than melancholy. Um, I also just want to bring it back to a point where you, at least I know a lot of friends who are Palestinian that have hope because you have to have hope. There's no other alternative. You can't just stop living. There's kind of the privilege of that despair that we spoke about a bit earlier. But also that we're also bringing up that hope is something that's has been ongoing. As much of these policies and these plans, there's also been a contra, an antithesis to an occupation that people are creating community over. That is like an experiential thing that should be really to be a guest in these spaces, at least to begin with. I think is something that I would really encourage, and of course to reach out and talk to people, even if you haven't met them. That's another thing. There's really no capes of any sort, or superheroes, whatever that might mean. I'm just saying that it's kind of a long-term, um, things can happen and change very quickly, but people have been working on this and have been creating structures to resist it for a really long time. Yeah. And to continue with that, I guess, and not kind of build this tower of victimhood, I guess, to stay in is another thing. You do want to bridge, like Zach is talking about, bridging between worlds, being a guest in other people's world and experiencing with them, um, is really good. And it was for us an opportunity to study our experience, I guess, our roots. We have family, we have people that we care about, so it's hard to disconnect. Anger many times has to be take in with, whatever else is happening. It can't turn us into enemies. It can't turn our own family members into enemies. It has to be something that we're kind of working with.
Yeah, thank you, Nona.
I would say that to my peers, I understand, and I also feel the temptation sometimes to disengage, even though I'm here, like in it. And I think that part of, I'm not sure how to articulate this exactly, but I do think part of what makes me despair and causes me to get lost in that and feel that it's not something that we can overcome is this sense that like history is inevitable or predictable, and that if things are just continuing to get worse every day, then they couldn't possibly get better. But I think it is sometimes worth reminding ourselves that I'm not sure if people, could predict that the apartheid regime in South Africa was going to fall when it did, that these things sometimes happen and we don't see them coming, even sometimes the day before. I think it's something important to remind ourselves. I also think that one way of potentially ameliorating this feeling of despair is seeking out community. I can relate to anyone who wakes up in the morning and opens up Twitter and an hour has passed and all you've done is doom scrolled. And things feel really like they're not in your power to change at all. But I think there's something also about, Elisheva gestured towards it a little bit as well, about like logging off for a second and talking to people and planning, finding like-minded people who are compelled to action and doing that action with them. And I think, in the US, we are very materially, I also just came back from the US and spent a month there. So I've now had the experience of kind of like seeing what the discourse is like there, and then being kind of brought back very suddenly into Israel-Palestine. And in the US, yes, it's just inescapable that, I mean, here as well, we are materially very complicit in Israel's occupation, in its apartheid regime, in its war of annihilation on Gaza. And I think that that's something that like even in not doing, even in choosing to disengage, where that's like that's an active choice, Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have much more to add.
I would say Dikla brings up this point that maybe we're all circling around, of like these things happening in our name, these things happening with us being the main funders, be it our tax dollars or elsewhere. And I think that recognition of responsibility is an important thing to hold on to, as a place to recognize that you can't disengage, because even if you actively choose to, there's still a part of you that is being taken from to support or to be present in this. And something I'll add, also coming back from the US recently, is I feel, although this war has been going on for over 2 years and beyond that, within the context of the history of Israel-Palestine, there is a great compulsion towards a conversation about semantics and, am I this label? Are you that label? Does that then negate you from being part of the conversation? I feel that that is a real challenge, and I would strongly suggest to our American Jewish partners, friends, family members, community members, to steer away from having debates about what semantics are used and what each of these different labels are saying about us, and create real relationships, because like I think a talk cannot necessarily lead to so much when we are trying to build coalition and work together to resist occupation and end this genocide. I think that we need to stay engaged, and it's of course people are feeling overwhelmed. Like, being on the ground inundated with media, I feel overwhelmed because of the media, and because I have to go to the bomb shelter, and because I have to see what this government and what this state is doing, and what the people who are living in the West Bank are doing, and what Palestinians are suffering from, whether that be direct violence or harassment or indirect discrimination at all times. I understand the overwhelm, and I think there's an important place to put that in validation. It is of course overwhelming, but it doesn't mean that there should be disengagement, because there is so much here that needs to be fixed, and there is so much energy in the American Jewish world that can be put towards this, and can also be a unifying factor, because we want to see a better world. We deserve to see a better world. We deserve a better future. The whole region deserves better. And if we can put our energy towards that, it's of utmost importance.
Amen. Yeah, I think you all really inspire me, and your approach to this work being rooted on the ground. And I hear the kind of clarity that it gives you in your thinking and the actions that you're taking. We can have the big conversations about how do we describe these larger developments, what's the right terminology, what's the right nomenclature. But there's a kind of focus that comes with seeing the threats that we're up against. And it kind of organizes your thinking about coalition building and strategy. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today, and for doing this fellowship. You've been a tremendous asset to the organizations that you worked at the Adva Center, at 972, at Bimkom, at RHR. And you guys are tremendous assets to this movement. You're leaders, and you're continuing to lead the fight on the ground in San Diego and stateside. And just really, really appreciate being in this work with you all. And want to thank everyone who joined today to hear from Nona, Dikla, and Elisheva in the NIF community and beyond. The work of this fellowship and the work of NIF as a whole really depends on you guys. As other people are opting out of these relationships, we're seeing more and more people opting in to supporting progressive movements on the ground, and you all in the NIF community are a part of it. And this partnership and this bridge building work couldn't happen without you, and this fellowship couldn't happen without you. So thank you for joining, and thank you for your continued support of NIF, and for those who donate to the fellowship for that too. I want to thank everybody for joining, and until next time, see ya.